starting the recording.
Vihan's recording. Thank you, Vihan. You guys, this is the last presentation for many of the students here. So can you just, first of all, just acknowledge them and give them a big round of applause? No, keep it going. This is the last presentation for Berkeley and Iona and Truman and Remy and Beck and Bix and Juniper and Beckett and Hudson. Not your last one. You're going to be making some more. And Vihan. So, yeah, welcome to the Onyx Space Arc Presentations. I'm Shirvan, so you didn't recognize me. Thank you so much for coming. A couple of really quick housekeeping notes before we get started. There's an exit straight ahead behind you over there. There's another one to my left over here in case of an emergency. There's also a restroom right around the corner over there. Another one down the hall over there. But please try not to move around during presentations. Wait until a presenter is done so that you don't distract the presenter or the audience. We'll take a little stretch break at the halfway point as well. At the end of each presentation, we'll have time for 3 or 4 questions. If the presenter doesn't have time to answer all of the questions, feel free to stick around afterwards to ask them. I think we'll have some time before dismissal if you want to catch up with them one-on-one. Or definitely seek them out at Expo Night on Thursday to chat with them some more. Expo Night's Thursday at 5 o'clock. Just want to say a few words before inviting the first presenter up to the stage. For the past 9 months, I've had the honor of collaborating with this amazing band of middle schoolers, and for the past 6 weeks, I've seen them dive into their projects in earnest. And like I said, for most of the students you're about to hear from, this is their last presentation at Brightworks, because many of them are heading off to different schools for high school. So I'm going to keep my comments short this afternoon, since we'll be singing their praises in another speech next week at the graduation ceremony. But I do want to share a couple of observations just about the process of the projects. Space is a big topic, like a really, really big topic. And witnessing the students narrowing down their project ideas was fascinating. A couple of things really stuck out to me. First, there's something that's about the Brightworks model that's like really unique. The way that we do project-based learning here is pretty special. The vastness of the subject allows room for just about anything to be possible. And at first this can be really daunting or overwhelming, but once that seed of an idea gets planted and the excitement around it starts to build, the students really begin to nurture and support each other until that seed takes root. And over the course of 6 weeks, working side by side and experiencing the ups and downs of project work in a collaborative workspace, their ideas grow into something really beautiful. The other thing that impressed me about their projects is that everyone not only chose to do something that they were really passionate about, but they also chose something that allowed them to grow. They challenged themselves to try new things or to master a craft that they had only just begun to learn. I said this in the last arc, and it's worth repeating. The presenters you're about to hear from are some of the hardest working people I've worked with, and I've learned so much from them, and I'm sure you all learned something new this afternoon as well. So here's the order of presentations for the afternoon. First we'll hear from Berkeley about the space-themed tarot deck, then Iona's and Beck's oil paintings, Truman's Ring World model, Bix's Alien screenplay, Juniper's Planet Fashion magazine. We'll take a 4-minute body break before proceeding with the second half, which starts off with Vihan's telescope project, Nate's solar oven, Remy's turbojet engine, Tatsuo and Hudson's video on escape velocity, and Beckett's geology website. And lastly, I want to thank all the staff members who supported the students with their projects, especially Sam, Rich, June, Tito, Rob, Gaver, and Liam. And without further ado, let's welcome our first presenter, Berkeley.
my project is a space-themed tarot deck. So to start off, before I explain the story of my project, I want to explain what tarot is for those of you who don't know. A tarot deck is a deck of cards that, if laid out a certain way, can tell your future. It can tell lots of different parts of your future, from big things like just like your general future and love, to just like the simplest things as yes or no questions. Okay, so starting this project, I had a pretty clear idea of what I wanted to do. In the past, I'd received a couple of tarot decks and didn't really know what to do with them. I started to teach myself how to read them, but never really got past the first few cards. I think this is because I had a hard time believing in tarot. I just couldn't get past the thought of you were shuffling the cards and laying them out in a certain way, therefore it told your future. So I wanted to understand that more. In another part of my life, the artist part, I've worked with a lot of different mediums, and there are a lot I still haven't worked with, in particular watercoloring. So I decided to put the 2 and 2 together. Now I just need to make it space theme, which was simple enough. For my project, I wanted to make planet-related watercolor art and the physical cards of 5 cards from a tarot deck, and a guidebook on how to read tarot and the meaning behind the planets and cards I chose. So after getting approved, I just pretty much, within the first 2 days, figured out what planets I wanted to do for what cards. For example, Jupiter, and the Wheel of Fortune. Jupiter represents luck, growth, expansion, understanding, abundance, and opportunity. And the Wheel of Fortune, also known as the Wheel, represents good luck, destiny, fate, fortune, and chance. The planet and the cards seem to have the same overall meaning, luck. So I decided to do Jupiter as the planet for the card, the wheel. Feeling pretty confident with the cards I chose, I emailed my expert, Jody Frandl. She's a tarot enthusiast. She got back to me within the same day, and we planned a meeting for the next week. So while I waited, I did pretty much all my research, did a water and coloring lesson with Siobhan, and sketched out my watercolor paintings. So week 2 comes around, and I have my interview with Jody. She was very helpful and fun to talk to. During the meeting, we went over what colors represent for what cards, and she told me that I should choose a card that represents me. So with this in mind, I did a lot of research, and I ended up with these 2 cards, Strength and the Page of Wands. There are like hundreds of ways to figure out what card is you, and that's partly what took so long, but I ended up taking the route of following your zodiac sign. It's pretty simple. I'm a Leo. The Leo's card is Strength. Every zodiac sign has a tarot card. That's why one of the cards is Strength. Leos are also fire signs, and the Suit of Wands in a tarot deck represents the element fire, and because I'm a youth, I would be a page. So therefore, for my second card, I chose Page of Wands. Alright, so after all that, I get sick, and I just don't come to school for the rest of the week and wasted a bunch of valuable work time. By the time I get over being sick, it's week 3. I finish my sketches and pretty much just paint for the rest of the week. I'd originally planned to do 5 cards from the Major Arcana deck. Okay, wait, side note, I need to explain this part about a tarot deck. A tarot deck has 2 parts. The first half, the Major Arcana, and the second half, the Minor Arcana. The Major Arcana is 22 cards and represents the major parts of your life, like marriage, children, and getting a job. The Minor Arcana is 56 cards and represents the smaller parts of your life, like day-to-day events and situations. Okay, anyways, I planned to do 5 cards, but I ended up doing 10 because I had the time and they were also interesting. I couldn't just choose 5. Towards the end of week 3 and the beginning of week 4, I tried to figure out the back of my cards. My original plan was to paint one back, take a picture of it, and then print out 10 copies, then glue those 10 copies, cut it out and glue the 10 copies onto the backs of the cards. but like printed out color stuff just doesn't look that good, so I ended up painting the same picture 10 times. Finally, my card's done. I laminated them. They look great. After making those first 10 cards, I really wanted to do the rest of the deck. But a tarot deck is 78 cards, and I just didn't have the time to do all of those. I spent the rest of my time organizing my research and did some practice reading with tarot. Speaking of tarot, remember when I was saying I had a hard time believing in tarot? So as I got to learning how tarot works, it turns out it's a lot more than just shuffling the cards. Like how when you're doing tarot, you're supposed to use your left hand, because people who do tarot believe that the left hand, or the left side of your body, is the spiritual side, and not a lot of people are connected to their spiritual side. This is why they believe a lot of people are right-handed. In the end, I'm really glad this was my last project at Brightworks. I really enjoyed it. I learned so much, and I'll be so sad to leave. Lastly, I'd like to thank some people. Thank you to Mandisa and June for approving my project, Arson for pretty much just teaching me how to read tarot, Shervan for teaching me how to watercolor, and friends and family for just emotional support, and sorry if I forgot to mention you. Any questions? Sam.
If you're in the audience and you want to get into tarot, would you have any suggestions for like books or resources to get started?
My suggestion is to actually just like get a tarot deck and sit down with it and just study the cards. It's best to choose a tarot deck that you like most. Like I have two, and there's one I just don't really like. It's like a steampunk one. I don't love it. The one I had pictures of, which was like a witch tarot deck, I really love it, and it like connected with me and it made a lot of sense, like the pictures. So if you choose one that you can understand the pictures, you don't really actually have to do a lot of reading. Like obviously you want to do some. I found it easy to learn through just someone like sitting down with me and telling me rather than doing research. So if you can find like someone you know to help you, it's pretty easy. Brooke?
Do you believe in tarot now?
I think I believe in it a lot more. Maybe not like completely, but definitely a lot more. Yeah. Ethan?
So you said like practice tests?
Yeah.
This is going to sound kind of stupid, but did any of those really come through?
Well, a lot of them were for like farther in the future. There were some where people just asked like, will I die tomorrow? And it said no. So yeah, those ones came true. Any other? Oh, Rich.
Do you have any advice for folks that are intimidated by watercolor, like myself?
Practice. That's what I did, and I turned out pretty good. Yeah. If that's it, next is Iona. Alright. Hi, my name's Iona, and my project is oil painting astrology. Just a disclaimer, before we get started, I just want to say I'm not a person who's super into astrology or anything. I just thought it would be fun to research. If you're really into it and a super strong believer, that's really cool. And if you think it's all made up, that's also cool too. One more thing to clarify. Astronomy is a scientific study of celestial objects beyond Earth's atmosphere, and astrology is a study of movement and relative positions of celestial bodies having an influence on human affairs in the natural world. We're going to be talking about astrology in this one. Okay, so let's rewind to the beginning of this project. When it came to think about a space arc, I had no ideas and it was getting late to decide. I was trying to remember and think of ideas when I thought of my studio, which was oil painting. I loved it and I decided I wanted to do an oil painting project. But I still didn't know what to paint and what to research. I knew I didn't want to go down the super sciencey and complicated route for space arc, so I was looking for topics and I came across astrology. It sounded fun and interesting to research, so I picked it. So I knew I wanted to do astrology and I knew I wanted to oil paint, but I'm not even going to go over how many times I changed my project even after my declaration. The final plan was to do 1 or 2 triptych oil paintings of all the different star signs. A technical oil painting is a painting that's split into 3 sections. So for example, these are the 3 earth signs, all on one canvas, but 3 different paintings. I would research all about the signs, chart readings, and how accurate star signs actually are to us. My first step was making many different documents about each star sign's element, color, day, ruler, greatest compatibility, lucky numbers, dates, strengths, weaknesses, likes, dislikes. So yeah, that was a lot. I had a lovely interview with my expert Melissa, an astrology enthusiast, and I learned a lot. I also wanted to find out about myself and my own chart. Can I see a raise of hands? How many people know their star sign? Alright, can I see a raise of hands? How many people know their sun, moon, and rising sign? Now, how many people know their sun, moon, rising, Mercury, Venus, Pluto, Jupiter, Mars, Saturn, Uranus signs? Yeah, me neither, so I wanted to find out. I also put my birth information into lots of different websites that calculate your chart. The one I ended up liking and going with was AstroCharts, but I put my birthday into like 30 different websites. My identity is definitely getting stolen. If you don't know what a birth chart is, I'll give you an example. It's basically a snapshot of the sky when you were born. Here's a chart for January 1st, 2025, born at SF at 12 a.m. It's really complicated, but here are the basics. These are the houses. They always stay in the same placement. And these are the signs. As the sky moves, the placement rotates, but always in the same order, starting with Aries, then Taurus, and so on. Basically, the sign people know, your sun sign, is represented by this symbol. Basically, what it means is your sun sign was in that constellation / sign in zone at the time you were born. But you don't just have a sun sign, you also have a moon sign, which is represented by this symbol. The moon sign represents who you are on the inside and your emotions. And technically you have a sign for every single planet on the chart, but I'm not going to go over all their meanings. But the big ones are your sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign. Your rising sign is the sign that was on the horizon when you were born. It represents how people see you and how you represent yourself. So this is my chart. It turns out that I'm a Virgo sun, Cancer moon, and a Gemini rising. Say, okay, great. I'm sure you all know what that means. I decided to shift my focus and pick references because I still had to choose multiple references for each sign, and it took me a while to finalize the decisions, and more time again because I forgot that I had to combine them, so I had to choose different ones to make it look nice. I finished designing the Earth one and chose to do that painting first, which has nothing to do with me being a Virgo. Finally, I started to paint. I don't know what to say for this part. I just kind of painted and then painted and then painted for the next couple weeks. There kind of came a point where I started to hate my painting and procrastinated doing it. I love doing my research and I was just loving learning about birth charts, but I was kind of stopped painting, procrastinated it. But I was doing good, but I still had to make this presentation and do a lot more research, so in the end, I was not going to do a second painting. Eventually, I did more paintings, and now it's pretty much done. I didn't do more paintings, but eventually I came back doing my paintings, and it's pretty much done. And now I can kind of read charts, so that's cool. Overall, I love this project, and I learned a lot and enjoyed doing this. But I really couldn't have done it without my friends, my expert Melissa, and of course your band. Come to Expo and see my paintings, and I may be giving birth chart readings if I feel up for it. Thank you so much for listening. I had fun giving my last Brightworks presentation. Any questions? Rob?
I wanted to ask you a question about your presentation slides. Did you hand draw those?
Yeah.
They're very good.
They are, yes.
Rich?
You said we can kind of read charts now. What does reading charts entail?
So basically the placement of like where the planets are, what planets are in what houses, and all that stuff means stuff about your life. And I've kind of started to learn how to like articulate what they mean to an extent.
Awesome, thank you.
Arson?
Rainforest, sorry. If someone
I'd say talk to someone is really helpful. I just found it helpful to just look at my chart and just puzzle it out slowly. Just start with your own and figure out what that means and then move on to other people's. Simon?
Which sites do you think you were most likely to have gotten your identity from?
Sorry, can you, what?
Which sites?
You were pretty sure you
Oh,
might have gotten your identity.
I don't remember all the name of them, but there were a lot. Alright, without further ado, Beck!
Alright, I got a few sites here that have my name on it. I'm not really sure how that happened. Alright, I have text on the side. Cool. Hi everyone. During the last arc, I went out of my comfort zone and had a really good time working with sewing. And this arc, I was really excited to continue exploring new skills at my final year at Brightworks. I had hoped to join the Fine Arts Studio for Space Arc exploration, but I didn't get in. But when I was coming up with ideas, I looked back at my studio options and realized I still wanted to learn oil painting, so I decided to make my project around that. All right. I don't know. This slide's just kind of here. I don't know. For my project, I wanted to make a large oil painting, which would improve my skills in drawing, painting, and color matching. I also wanted to boost my confidence in my artistic abilities because I've always had trouble with that. Originally, my painting design was themed around the space race, so to go alongside that, I focused my research on NASA and its economic impacts, but that didn't really end up happening painting-wise. I started off by working with Siobhan on the basics of shading and sketching, before quickly moving on to my first painting of a simple apple, there's a photo there. This gave me a strong foundation for my final painting, which I started right after the first one to give myself as much time as possible, because it takes a really long time, and this canvas is pretty big. I learned about the undercoat and underpainting and completed those, then moved on to the background items and gradient, and finally did the foreground, and I think I'm just about done. Maybe there's 3 things I could add, but whatever, not important. I researched and learned lots about how NASA spends its money, how NASA generates economic value, and how our government spends its money, or how our government raises funds. The most interesting thing that I learned is that, according to a 2023 government report, NASA, with only a $25 billion budget, generated $75 billion in economic value, which includes direct NASA spending, indirect economic impact of NASA's supply chain and other ripple effects, and induced value from employee spending, government tax income, and other smaller factors. In total, this means that NASA generates almost triple the economic value as the government pays for, and it seems like it's a misstep that we're decreasing the budget, especially because of the innovation that NASA it does and continues to accomplish. Reflecting on this project, some things that I will look back on with fondness include the joy of pushing myself to really complete a well-done piece, which is something that I've really enjoyed doing for these last 2 projects, and the experience of just painting. I really enjoyed it. I think this was a really strong final project for me, and it pushed me into exploring new areas, how to create a tangible final piece, and just be something to look back on. I'm looking forward to continuing creating paintings and other art in the future. I'm way more confident than I was at the start, and I had a ton of fun. I want to thank all the people who helped me, like Siobhan, Rich, Micheline and Sam, my approvers, and all my classmates in the art space who gave me feedback. I'm excited to share my painting at Expo with you. And does anyone have any questions? Hi. Well, I wanted to get to painting as quickly as possible, and so I just picked something that I wanted to paint. I know that sounds stupid, but since you can see I used a reference image. I just found a reference image that I felt was meant something to me, and I was excited to paint, and I chose that.
Where's it from?
It's from Outer Wilds, which is a video game. It's really cool. You should play it. Noah.
How does Outer Wilds relate to space?
Well, the whole game is related in space. I can show you it. I don't know. It's not like the painting is clearly. It's an astronaut. I don't know. Like. You right there.
Do you think we actually landed on the moon, or do you think it was big hoax?
I think that old film video is a little untrustworthy, so who knows? Rich.
Thank you. So your subject changed from depicting the space race to painting something else. Like, why? I'm curious about why that happened and like what was the process of reading there?
Yeah. So when I was figuring out what I wanted to paint, I talked with Shaban some about my reference image and what I wanted to do, and I was having trouble coming up with something that like resonated with me strongly that I wanted to paint, but that was also realistic to do. And so at a certain point, after like maybe a few days of that, I was just like, all right, let me just paint something that I'm excited to paint, and we'll see how that goes. Does that sound?
Yeah, great.
Rob, sorry, I meant to not take more questions.
You mentioned underpainting and color matching and all that, and I know you worked with acrylic before, but what did you learn about oil painting versus acrylic painting?
Oil painting, like the blending and the experience, it dries a lot slower, but for my painting, it actually, I think it worked really well. It's hard to see on the projector, but there's a lot of gradients and other stuff in here, and so I think, at least for this painting, because of it really made the lighting pop out more instead of just being like opaque, flat colors, because it's all blended together. All right, I think I'm meant to move on now. Hey, Truman, get up here.
Hello. As you probably already know, I'm Truman, and my project is titled Megastructures in Space. Yeah. My project obviously has to do with megastructures and space, but before I tell you about it, I probably should explain what a megastructure actually is. The definition for megastructure is a large human-made object. A good example of which is the Pyramid of Giza, which definitely was a megastructure for technology at the time. Pyramid. A good example closer to home is the Golden Gate Bridge, completed in 1937, I think. It fell solidly into the megastructure category. The last example I'll give you is a little bit more out of this world. It is the International Space Station. The ISS, for short, is the largest human-made structure ever sent into space. So, back to, the ring. Megastructures in space. I knew a little bit about different space megastructures when I started the project, but the one I eventually landed on was the ring world. Ring world. But what is a ring world? The way of the future. But what is aquaponics? Sorry, back to my storyline. Okay, so, ring worlds are huge spinning rings that can support life on their inner surface. Imagine the entirety of 13-mile-long Manhattan Island curved into a ring that's approximately 4 miles in diameter with the houses and buildings on the inside. The coolest and most important thing about Ringworld is it makes its own gravity. You may ask yourself, what's so important about gravity? Astronauts on the ISS float around with low gravity all the time. Well, the bad thing about being in low gravity is it causes bone loss, due to your body not experiencing the stresses of Earth's gravitational pull. Bones atrophy at approximately 1% a month, but that means after 6 years, you'll have 50% of your bone mass. It's not very many bones. If you want to spend your life in space, you absolutely need gravity. Humans, however, don't know how to make gravity, but we do know how to make artificial gravity. The ring world's rotation is the key to making artificial gravity with centripetal force. Have any of you filled a bucket with water and tied it to a rope and swung it around your head? Other than Beckett? Cool. Well, for those of you who haven't tried it, where was I? The water in the bucket will stay at the bottom even if it's going upside down. The ring worlds works on a similar principle. Things on the inside of the ring will feel a force like gravity pulling them into the ring. On a bit of a tangent, I feel like I need to mention the centripetal versus centrifugal controversy. These are two terms used to describe the gravitational force from a spinning ring. In my research, I found that centripetal and centrifugal forces are two terms used to describe the same thing. But centripetal force is from an outside perspective, and centrifugal force is from the perspective of someone sitting on the spinning ring. I'm making a model of the author Larry Niven's ring world. Niven briefly attended Caltech, which is generally considered one of the biggest engineering schools in the world. My model is a lot smaller than the ring in the book, but it'll still carry over some similarities, such as textured terrain and clear atmosphere-holding walls. Some things that the book's ring world doesn't have that mine will are transparent spokes and a stand to hold up the ring. A few important moments in the ring world's creation was spinning my cardboard for restoration, cutting acrylic and laser cutter, acrylic. Okay. And cutting the gluing the whole thing together. Where was I? Oh, a few issues I had ran into were not having enough laser cutter wood to cut the entire circle, so I made it entirely out of acrylic instead. And the ring, even cut in half, was too big for a laser cutter, so I shrunk it from 21 inches to 18 inches. The assembled ring world model is 18 inches diameter, which I just said, and 2 inches thick. I put textured clay on the inside to mimic terrain, and I made a suitable stand things for the ring to spin in. Originally, I thought that the ring would need an electric motor to create enough centripetal force to mimic Earth's gravity. But with a manual spin, I can get a light object to stick to the inside of the ring's inner surface. I think it's time for the gratitudes. Yeah. I'm very grateful for Sam for helping me with computer stuff, Tito for laser cutting with me, Rob for being awesome, obviously, Siobhan for providing cat stuffies, and my awesome classmates for being very helpful and kind, and finally you all for letting me talk about stuff on stage. Thank you. I'll see you all next time. Any questions? Sam?
One of my favorite aspects of your model is that you modeled it to scale of the Larry Niven ring world structure. Do you remember what the scale factor is?
It's a very long number. The ring, or I should say, the ring in the Larry Niven's book is 186 million miles in diameter. So I scaled it down a lot. Speed?
Have you actually read Ringworld?
Not really. Just kind of skipped over that part. Wheel?
So it spins really fast. It makes gravity. Wouldn't we also spin and then get...
You're meant to be spinning on the ring's inner circle. You're standing on it.
Right,
Here, I'll go back to, it's a really, really big ring. I'll go back to, aha, those are people.
Yeah.
Sorry, give me a sec.
No, wait. Okay, you're never awesome.
Okay. Rich.
I have a build on Will's question. Is the assumption that in a large-scale ring world that the air around the people, like the quote-unquote atmosphere, also moves with the ring, so you don't experience, like, you're not getting blown off the side?
Yes.
Is that similar to, I don't know, trying to build on Will here.
It's a great question. I think that the rotation would also drag the atmosphere along with it, theoretically. It's a lot of atmosphere to move, so I'm not really sure. You might like in the very middle get like this huge wind burst down the middle, but I think it would drag a lot of it. I think that's the last question I'm legally allowed to answer. So here we have 6.
Hi everyone. Hi. Oh my gosh. Welcome to my final Brightworks presentation for my Alien screenplay. So when I first heard about Space Arc, I immediately was thinking to do a self-sustaining tea garden run on solar power. But then I got another idea for the aforementioned screenplay. Aliens, politics, and plays, oh my. These are 3 things I quite enjoy. So despite my initial hesitance to change plans, let's go. My first step was a list of different potential premises, and I had to narrow it down to 1. I went through a lot of different methods for ranking them, general pros and cons, how well they fit my core themes, which were intimacy and politics, and how well they fit the vibe of the one character I had created, you can see down in the corner. After longer than I'd like to admit of debating, I settled on my third option, a story about a human ship crash landing on an alien planet and how the aliens deal with the aftermath, with the story coming from the alien's perspective. I listened to a bunch of writing advice in the beginning because I was really nervous, especially in sci-fi, a genre I've never really worked on. Brandon Sanderson has a lecture series that I listened to, which was really helpful for me as a jumping off point. Next, I chose my program, Celtex or Celtex. It's a screenwriting program for both stage plays and film. I've had my gripes with it, but I really like the formatting. One of said gripes is it has a writing versus thinking timer. It counts the time down to the second you're actively typing versus thinking. So that's really stressful to be looking at all the time. It's also been trying to kick me off the platform. So yeah, real love-hate relationship between the 2 of us, but ultimately the formatting's so good I just couldn't leave. As I begun to write, I realized I couldn't rely on my main writing strength, which is descriptors, and had to write dialogue. Which, though I was excited to build a new skill, I don't always like going out of my comfort zone. A lot of dialogue advice is essentially, let your characters have a conversation in front of you and write down what they say. This has normally worked quite well for me. But this time, I didn't know my characters well enough to know what they'd say next. It was like an awkward coworker small talk thing, and we were just discussing the weather. It was a real fight, and one of my biggest struggles. And yes, I was overthinking the details a little bit, but this is where I hit a lot of my roadblocks. So I could talk about how I wrote, and then continued to write, because that's basically what the rest of this project was, but that's pretty boring. So let's talk a little bit about my world building. World building is essentially what it says on the box, building a world and expanding on it in the world that your story takes place. You can get as deep as you want, but these are the elements I felt were relevant to figure out for my story. The governmental system is pretty central to the plot, but in all honesty, I made up a system, then researched what it would be called after, so I ended up with a communist democracy. Oopsie. The legal system is based on common law. Common law is, in essence, filling gaps of written law with decisions of past judges. It can often be a bit skewed as it relies on unwritten laws and personal interpretation. Legal is one of the things I really want to expand on in the future, as I feel I didn't get a full grasp on it, but I would really like to build it out more, as it was really interesting from what I researched. The aliens themselves, I didn't expand on that much in terms of biology or sciencey terms, even if I wanted to, I did not have time, but I tried to go into their social customs. Generally, they all see each other as very equal, and I tried to show that through their conversations and how they interact with one another, and John, they're alien, are human. One of my favorite research parts of this project, though, was around the background chatter of civilians and John's super awesome negotiation skills. This mostly consisted of me going up to people in our band and asking sensible, easy-to-answer afternoon questions such as, if aliens landed on Earth, what questions would you have about them? Not to them, though, to your government. Or if you were kidnapped and you asked a question that upset your kidnapper, and if they yelled at you, what would you say to continue the conversation after? Thanks everyone for putting up with those. Reflecting on my project, I don't think it was my best, but it did force me out of my comfort zone and into some new territory. I wouldn't normally do a writing project or work on dialogue, but I did. I wish I'd written a little faster, but overall, I'm really happy leaving Brightworks on this note, even if you don't want to go. At Expo, I'll have up my many draft papers and a printed out copy in its current, though unfinished state. Thank you to all my friends for all the support, all the people in class I bugged with weird questions, Arsa, Mira, and Nava for writing advice, Shervan for scaling me back and forcing me through decisions, my parents for also being general support, and Brightworks, farewell. Thank you guys, any questions? Rob.
Do you believe in aliens?
Absolutely. I actually have a slight distrust of people who have no belief in aliens. Arson.
After doing this project, what would you say was the best writing advice you got?
Oh, I think everyone hears it and you know it, but you don't do it. But just word dump and edit after. Don't get stuck in the moment, but just word dump it all out. And I didn't do that a couple times, but ultimately it works so well. B.
What was your first alien character's name?
Her name is Zarena. Thank you to my friend for that name, because in all honesty, in all the drafts, I named all of them Bleak Lord. But her name is Zarena, and she's the main character. Yeah, gave her finally.
How far through Brandon's lecture series did you get?
I got through 4.5 of the lectures. I think last I was on characters, and we had just gone over plot structure. It was really interesting, and I, for some reason, listened to his one about like marketing and making it in the world as a writer, which wasn't really necessary, but informative. Had fun. All right, that is all I have time for. Jennifer!
Hello everyone, I'm Juniper, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my project, designing fashion inspired by each different planet. More specifically, my goal for this project was to design a fashion magazine focusing on 3 main different planets, with a broader section for the rest of the planets, all with fashion designs to go along with them. In my magazine, I would also briefly talk about my design process, like sketches, learning fashion design and research, and how different cultures view the planets, as well as show my inspiration. I wanted my magazine to have the same feel as like a vintage 70s magazine, with bold and organized colors, interesting makeup looks, and artistic outfits. I would also take inspiration from techniques used in modern zine making, like hand-drawn images, collage aspects, and interesting facts. My first step of this project was entirely research. I wanted to get a good idea of different cultures' view on the planets, what connections they had across cultures, and I get ideas flowing in my head for when I would later be designing the outfits. For each planet, I researched their mythology, astrology, and layers they're made up of. I primarily researched Greek and Roman mythology, since that's what the planets are named after, but I also researched about Indian mythology, Indian astrology, Chinese astrology, and indigenous Australian storytelling. One thing I learned about is the Tiwi tribe in Australia. They believe the moon, a man, follows the trail of the sun, a woman, across the sky. The woman is believed to carry a big torch when traveling across the sky, while the moon man is believed to carry a smaller torch. After I researched, I turned all that fun stuff into 7 different outfit designs. And yes, I know there are 8 planets, but I couldn't include Earth because of its weird mythology. To design my outfits, I had to begin with learning how to draw a fashion figure. I watched a few different tutorials, but one method was by far my favorite, so I'll give you a quick tutorial on how to do it. You begin with drawing 4 circles, all of them the size that you want your head to be. You then use this as a guide and add the shoulders halfway through the second circle, the waist 1 away from the bottom, and hips right below that. A good rule of thumb during this step is to make the shoulders and hips at opposite angles. This adds more movement and sass to your drawing. After that step, you add the arms and legs, and you're done. I know, pretty impressive. I kind of skimmed over that last part though, so let me give you a few tips. Legs are always longer than you think they are. Even these legs in my picture are kind of too short. The thighs are usually more curved on the outside than the inside, and the calves are usually the opposite, curved on the inside and flatter on the outside. And lastly, the side where the hip is higher is the side where the leg needs to be in a straight and strong position. The other leg can be pointed, bent, anything really. Another thing I like about these techniques is they work for all body types. One thing I wanted to do during this project was not just draw your typical model body. One way I incorporated this into my designs was basing the size of the models off of the size of the planets. And so, with all of that, here are the first sketches of the planet designs I chose. Mars, Venus, and Jupiter. I chose these because they were my favorite designs and also had great stories to go along with them. My favorite parts on them are the ribs and ribs and heart on Mars' chest plate, Venus' crazy skirt, and Jupiter's majestic hair and makeup. Okay, now before I show you my third iteration, let me tell you a little something. Way back in Declaration Week, I knew that all this drawing for the second iteration would take way longer than 2 weeks, so I gave myself 3 weeks. However, that only left 2 weeks for my third iteration. My third iteration, where I needed to learn to design a magazine, learn to use Adobe InDesign, print my magazine, and make this presentation. So yeah, these last weeks have been kind of stressful. But I still learned a bunch of interesting things. I learned a beginner's guide to using InDesign, which was quite confusing at first, and still is, but it was definitely a stretch out of my comfort zone, considering it's rare that I work on a computer outside of Docs, my beloved. One thing that I did to manage doing all this was interview magazine, zine, and book designer named Justin Carter, who gave me a bunch of great tips for starting in InDesign. So right now, I've got a magazine nearly fully designed, and all I've got to do is print it out. In the future, there are some designs that I made earlier on that I genuinely want to develop more, and if I ever get a good grasp at sewing, I would love to give a whack at one of these outfits. So I'd like to finish this presentation off with Shervan, as always, for being a supportive collab, my friends and family for giving me some light when I felt stressed, both Sam for finding me an expert, and Justin Carter, my peer, for being my expert, and my peers for giving me helpful feedback on my designs, and lastly, just anyone that's brought light to these last few months, because I needed it to make this project successful and just to make my year nice. Any questions? Rob?
Do you think you will actually design and make one of these outfits for real?
Okay, knowing my motivation in life and if it's achievable or not, I probably won't, but I will probably try. Noah?
Which of these costumes or outfits was your favorite?
Probably Mars, but it's tight. It's a tight choice. B?
Are there any advertisements in this magazine?
No. I'm sorry. Okay, last one. Sam?
You talked about Venus's skirt. Can you say a little bit more about what the details are on this?
Yeah, it's not completely fleshed out, but the idea is that it would have a lot of layers and it'd be really bright reds and oranges, because Venus's surface, even though most people think of it as white and pearly, its surface is actually this really deep red and orange. So I wanted to represent that as an underlayer. Okay, next we have an intermission.
Get up from your seats. You should not be sitting down. If you sit down, just stand up. Just stand up. All right. Hey, if you know, you know. This song is